Welcome back to This is a Commander channel, where this is a Commander channel, and today I'm going to be talking about Commander Tough Rules and Cool Interactions, episode 99. Today's episode is going to take a look at how the game handles determinate and indeterminate actions when applied to certain kinds of triggered abilities. I had actually planned to do this episode a long time ago with Layla the Blade Reforged and Joda the Unifier, but we have the Doctor Who set releasing soon, and we got some perfect examples of these things all within this set, so I imagine these are going to be some questions that come up a lot going forward in Commander. So let's begin by taking a look at the main card in this situation. The War Doctor is a creature that has two triggered abilities, but we're going to focus on the first one that says, whenever one or more permanents phase out, and whenever one or more other cards are put into exile from anywhere, put a time counter on the War Doctor. So let's start the first scenario with an easy one. You control your War Doctor and also control a Yasmin Khan that has the activated ability of tap to exile the top card of your library. Until your next end step, you may play it. So clearly, each time you activate her ability, your War Doctor would see one card exiled from your library, and he would trigger that one time and get a single time counter. So let's step it up a little bit, and now you cast the sorcery Ecstatic Beauty, which says exile the top 3 cards of your library. You may play those cards until end of turn. Put 4 time counters on each of those cards that has Suspend. So how many time counters would your War Doctor get when you resolve this card? 3 cards are being exiled, but when we look at the wording on the War Doctor card, we can see that it has whenever one or more stipulation, so this Ecstatic Beauty would be one singular event of 3 cards being exiled, so the Doctor would only receive one single time counter. Okay, so let's start increasing the complexity of things. Etali Primal Storm is a classic Commander card that sees a ton of play, and its ability says that whenever Etali Primal Storm attacks, exile the top card of each player's library. Then you may cast any number of spells from among those cards without paying their mana cost. Without paying, not playing. So what is going on here? If you trigger your Etali while you control the War Doctor, how many time counters will the Doctor get? You might read this and see that 4 players are each individually exiling a card from their library, and so that's 4 separate actions happening to exile those cards. But sadly for this Elder Dino, his attack will only put one single time counter onto the Doctor, even in a 4-player game. Yes, it's for individual libraries that a card is being exiled from, but the game does this action all at the exact same time simultaneously as the Etali ability resolves. So it would fall into the one event exiling 4 cards, so one time counter. Alright, now let's really start to mess with things. You control your War Doctor, and then you attack with Ryan Sinclair, which says, whenever Ryan attacks, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card. You may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost if it's a spell with mana value less than or equal to Ryan's power. Put the exiled cards not cast this way on the bottom of your library in random order. So after you attack with Ryan Sinclair, you trigger his ability and you exile 4 lands and then an Ecstatic Beauty. So in total, 5 cards from this singular triggered event happening. How many time counters will your War Doctor end up getting? You might be tempted to say that the Doctor only gets the 1 time counter, but in this case, he will be getting 5 triggers to add a time counter. It may not make sense as to why this is different from something like Ecstatic Beauty and Etali, but it, for the most part, just comes down to one singular word: until. Earlier in the episode, I used 2 words, determinate and indeterminate. And the word until makes an exile effect like what we see on Ryan Sinclair go from being a known or a defined amount to now being unknown or undefined. When resolving that Ryan Sinclair ability and exiling the 5 cards, we didn't know when we started it that it would end up exiling 5 cards, because we have to wait and see what the exiled card is to know if we must do it again. So we exile a card, it's a land. So now we do that action again. It's a land, so now we do that action again. It's a land, and so on and so forth. Because of this, the game does actually see each of these exiled cards as an individual exile event, rather than seeing it as 5 cards simultaneously exiled. Now, there are a whole lot of cards in Magic that do this indeterminate form of exiling. Even in this Doctor Who set, there are cards like the Day of the Doctor, which is a saga that the first 3 chapters all have you exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a legendary card. Further adding to this, there is a very powerful mechanic in Magic that sees some inclusion in the Doctor Who set, but it is just on a ton of other cards, and this is Cascade, like on Into the Time Vortex. And this very clean version of the card, while nice and clean looking, doesn't remind us what Cascade does. So on this version, we can see that the reminder text of Cascade makes it very clear that it does include that until clause for how many cards you exile, making it an undefined amount, an indeterminate amount. So for every single card you exile via Cascade, your War Doctor will get that many time counters. So let's now get another complex scenario. Plarg and Nasari is a legendary creature that has the triggered ability that says, at the beginning of your upkeep, each player exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card. An opponent chooses a non-land card exiled this way, you may cast up to 2 spells from among the other cards exiled this way without paying their mana cost. Clearly, if you have been paying attention, then you will know to look for that until word that is in the text of this effect, and we do see it there. But this card also has a bit of complexity, as it does something similar to the Etali in that it's each player is exiling from their library until they hit a non-land card. So how does that play out with the War Doctor? If you're in a 4-player game and player 1 exiles 1 total card, player 2 exiles 2 total, player 3 exiles 2 total, and player 4 exiles 2 total cards, then how many triggers will the Doctor get? The problem with Etali before was that 4 cards were exiled, 1 from 4 different libraries, so the game sees that as one instance of more than 1 card being exiled. Is that going to be the case here? All 4 players exile 1 card, with each player checking to see if they must do this again, and player 1 exiled a non-land, so they don't. So only players 2, 3, and 4 must do this action again, and then this second time, they all 3 exile a non-land card. It's undefined how many each player would have exiled, but are they actually being done simultaneously? That's the key here, and we can see in the comprehensive rules in section 608.2f that says, some spells and abilities include actions taken on multiple players and/or objects. In most cases, each such action is processed simultaneously. If the action can't be processed simultaneously, it's instead processed considering each affected player or object individually. AppNap order is used to make the primary determination of the order of those actions. Secondarily, if the action is to be taken on both a player and an object they control, or on multiple objects controlled by the same player, the player who controls the resolving spell or ability chooses the relative order of those actions. Ooh, that was a big one. All right, so what that basically means is that because these are indeterminate exiles, we do need to take them one at a time for each player in AppNap, active player, non-active player, order, so that we can make sure each player is doing the right amount to satisfy the ability is resolving the way it should. So if you're going to make a War Doctor deck, a card like Plarg and Nasari can be an insanely powerful card to add a ton of time counters to your Doctor. in that example that I gave before, I realized I didn't actually provide a solid answer. If it was that player 1 exiled 1, and then players 2, 3, and 4 exiled 2 cards each, that wouldn't just be a smaller number. That would actually be 1 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. So 7 counters that would be added to your War Doctor. And finally, before we close out this episode, a bonus question. You may have noticed that there is more than just exiling cards to get time counters added onto the War Doctor. It also says whenever one or more other permanents is phased out. So let's take a look at an old card like Equipose, which I'll read its Oracle text. It's not too drastically different from its Oracle text, but still, it's an old card, so let's read the Oracle text. And it says, at the beginning of your upkeep, for each land target player controls in excess of the number you control, choose a land that player controls. Then the chosen permanents phase out. Repeat this process for artifacts and creatures. So let's say there is a player that you can legally target that has 6 lands, 5 artifacts, and 4 creatures when this ability resolves. And then you control 3 lands, 3 artifacts, and 3 creatures. How would this interact with your War Doctor? Will he get 1 time counter after all is said and done from this one ability resolving? Will he get 3 plus 2 plus 1 for a total of 6 time counters? Will he only get 1 plus 1 plus 1 for a total of 3 time counters? Or is there another answer that I haven't listed here? Please leave your answers down in the comments below, and if you want to, also provide your thought process behind the how you got to that answer, and do so, and then I'll provide some responses to those after the video has been out for a few hours to give everybody else a chance to provide their own thoughts without having the answers spoiled to them. Anyhow, that's all I've got for today's episode. As always, I hope that all of you have found this video to be entertaining at least, and I hope that a few of you have even learned something about the crazy rules in this great game of Magic. Have a good one. Ta-ta!